Hey everyone, and welcome to our third virtual reality-based session for the Houston Tech Rodeo. My name is Walter Davis, and I'm here today with Brian Bogus from Abstract. And as you can see, so Brian and I are actually at completely different locations. So right now, I'm streaming. Actually, I'm physically actually at the Studio Movie Grill, TYM Studio, and streaming this live there. I think Brian, you must be up in North Houston, I think, at the moment.
No, I'm
And
actually
although we're
I'm on the beach. I'm on the beach here in Jamaica,
you're on
just
the
hanging
beach.
out.
Oh, okay. So yeah, okay. That's probably a little better than North Houston. Yeah, we're at completely different locations, but this is one of the things virtual reality can do. You're sharing a stage here for the Houston Tech Rodeo in virtual reality. So yeah, Brian. So we're gonna have a fireside chat here. As you can see, we've got the flames going. I'm already feeling pretty toasty. We did forget the marshmallows, so neither of us
Ah,
brought
yes.
marshmallows. But we're gonna have a chat and talk a little bit about some of the work Abstract's doing, and also just talk about immersive technology in general. And like I said, looking forward to having it. I'm glad that everyone's here. We've got quite a few people here in AltSpace VR, so hey everybody. And yeah, Brian, maybe we just kick this off.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So yeah, all right, let's kick off with one of the first questions. Let's just jump right into it. Or what actually, Brian, tell us a little bit first about Abstract. Maybe set the scene before we get started. Let's talk a little Abstract.
Yeah. Abstract. We are an interactive software and visualization company. We do mostly things in the emerging tech space, so all things augmented reality, virtual reality, and then we typically can couple that with some software. And then on the visualization side, we still dive into some of the 3D animation and video work.
Awesome. So, and what brought Abstract to life? So maybe we'll start it with tell us about the early days and how the company was established.
The origin story. Yeah, actually, so back in college, I started a video production company, and I was playing college tennis at the time. And so once I had graduated, um, I became a tennis pro off of Lake Conroe, and I ran a junior program there. And through the process of starting that video production company, I met Andrew Baker, who's the other co-founder. One day I'm going to force him to be on stage with me and talk in front of everyone, but that's not his thing. So fortunately, I had worked with Andrew quite a bit, and we were very complimentary. Everything he was good at, I'm not, and vice versa. So one day we were sitting at dinner and we are looking at each other, and I had just finished, teaching 50 hours of tennis in a summer in Houston, and he was shooting LADA positions, and we looked at each other and we both just had the same look, and we knew like it's time for us to start something. So we decided to create, at the time, Abstract Media, and we were purely going to be a video and animation company, and this started in 2011. However, we quickly evolved into the interactive and software development space. Really, it was actually just about passion. I'm just a true believer that you have to, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you follow your passion. And I just have always had a love for gaming technology. So I was really fixated on augmented reality. So in 2012, we immediately jumped into augmented reality, and I remember us talking and saying, like, how are we going to do this? Like, we don't have the skill set right now. And I just looked at him and said, we'll figure it out. So we started diving into augmented reality, mobile-based AR very early. And as VR became much more consumer ready, we started in the Dev 1 kit of the Oculus and started working heavy in the experience side. What ended up evolving from the company is we actually kind of stepped out of doing a lot of the video work and animation, and really moved into the purely the interactive and software side. So we decided that rebranding was necessary. So we dropped the media from our name and added the .tech into our URL, and so now we just simplified it to something called Abstract.
Awesome. And how does a startup get exposure to large enterprise clients? I mean, it's great to see where you guys came from, but now how have you grown, and how have you found and created solutions and for these larger enterprises? And
Yeah.
how does Abstract do that?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one because, when we started the company, Andrew and I really started with 2 laptops and a Canon 7D and no money. Like, neither of us had backing, and we wanted to do the whole bootstrap mentality, and that was our plan from all along. And so then we had to figure out, like, how do we get some of these large enterprise companies to even look at us and consider us? And the key was a differentiator. And I don't mean like a value proposition, but I mean a way to get their attention. So we started walking the event floors, finding free tickets into these events. And that was the start. And then they're like, okay, we're not getting much attention. So how do we kind of level up our game? And our differentiator ended up becoming an augmented reality business card. So we built this card, and this has been about 4 versions in. And I'm totally wish I could show this to you in video, by the way, but believe it or not, as amazing as it is that we're sitting here in VR having a fireside chat on a skyscraper, video doesn't play nice in the slide deck, so we had to improvise. But we basically built this business card to get attention. So as we walked the event floors, we would walk up to someone and pull out the business card, open the app on our phone, and it would come to life in the palm of our hand. And people started recognizing the stability of our augmented reality, as well as the use cases that they could provide inside the industrial sector. So that opened up the opportunity to sales and marketing. And from there, we started getting a lot of exposure, a lot of word of mouth, and decided it was time to maybe enter in to try to win some awards and get our brand out there a little heavier inside the industrial sector. So we entered in 2014, we entered into the Business Marketing Association Lantern Awards, and we had built an augmented reality experience for Dynadrill, which basically was taking their tool and allowing them to present it into the event floor really anywhere. It could be the life size on the floor of the booth or on a tabletop experience. And Sylvia Cisneros with Dynadrill, honestly, she bought into it, she understood it, and she was willing to go for it. And she was one of the early adopters that I saw in oil and gas do something like this. And she got real creative. I mean, she was using all these marketing pieces with it, having people take pictures with the experience. And one thing that I realized is the return on the investment. I didn't even think about it at first. We were just trying to sell something that looked really freaking cool, right? Like, hey, your tool is sitting there in a hologram. But what it did is actually cut a ton of cost in shipping the equipment all over the world. I mean, they were shipping these heavy pieces of equipment. It was going into the booth. There was always tear down and everything else. And not only was this a way to prevent shipping, it also allowed them to activate and engage with their tool. So it really just offered a ton of value. And of course, pure mobility to use it in lunch and learns, everything outside of just the event space.
Wow, yeah, that is awesome. Actually, I love that that they can just take those components with them. So, I mean, how does Abstract differentiate themselves then from other AR, VR, let's say XR companies here in the Houston area?
Yeah, so the differentiator for us is interesting. I mean, we started very early on, right? And so I could kind of go through the same, song and dance about how amazing our team is and everything we can do, but we started in this very early. So we have been with the technology almost since the beginning, if you think about it. And so because we've seen so many different use cases inside the space, we've been able to show how not only the technology can evolve, but how we can utilize it to benefit really anybody. I mean, it fits in every single industry. But the other piece is we started as a service company. So our experience was all around creating custom experiences. And the more we started diving heavy into operations and training, the more we realized how powerful the data can be inside these experiences. So to kind of put it in perspective, if you're going to train in a gaming simulation or in VR, every event, every action, every movement you're doing can be tracked in a way that offers tremendous value to an organization, because it's not just about taking a test and making sure that people know what they're doing. You actually can let them experience it and run through that. But just giving them a score isn't enough. So what we did is we developed a product called Hubxr. And it's basically a tracking tool for all of these experiences. So regardless if you're using the Microsoft HoloLens and for mixed reality or the Oculus Quest for VR training, we can track it all into Hubxr and provide analytics and assessments inside Hub. And this goes for also operational applications. If you're going through an inspection process and you're going through 100 steps, we can all track it in real time in Hubxr and give the organization great analytics and great data to use to improve their training or operation. But we also don't want to compete with existing systems. We're not going to compete with a learning management system or a document management system or a record management system. There's so many of them, but we can centralize them and communicate with them by pushing and pulling the data. And so I think for us, being that we understand the experiential development, but also understand the value proposition of data and analytics on the back end, I think that's really our major differentiator in the space.
Awesome. So, I mean, you guys have come quite a long way. I mean, you have this amazing platform. I'm sure there were some ups and downs. Maybe you can just walk us through what was one of the scariest moments for you as a founder?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's about a million. I mean, if anyone's an entrepreneur, you know the roller coaster ride, and I know it's cliche, but I mean, it's totally true. And the scariest moments for me were early on. I mean, I've been doing it 10 years now, so every time we hit a scary moment a little later, it becomes easier, and I'm definitely more calculated. I mean, the thing is, when you are an entrepreneur, you're passionate about what you're creating. When you're passionate, it basically creates an emotional attachment. So everything that happens has major impact on you emotionally, mentally, everything. So early on, when we started just hitting the event floors, and I remember walking these floors for hours and hours, building, just trying to strum up business. We started actually feeling like we were succeeding. We started signing on bigger customers, bigger clients. But every time we did that, there were more insurance requirements, and in the payment terms. Oh man, the payment terms were brutal. You know, the thing is, you know, the people we typically deal with, the ones that are pushing these initiatives, are great to work with, but you know, in any corporation, when you're really high up, you're thinking about your financials. So payment terms are, you know, getting harder and harder. They used to be 30 and 60. Now they're usually 60 and 90. We have some clients that are 120-day payment terms up to 149. So as we started building up all these projects, we had to fund them. And the thing is, Andrew and I pretty much bootstrapped it. We did not raise traditional money. We wanted to go as lean as possible. We finally raised a little bit of money a couple of years in. But ultimately, we got to the edge of payroll, and I had no clue how we were going to make payroll. So what we ended up doing is I was pushing to get a short-term loan in place to try to make payroll. And literally the day before payroll, the wire comes in, and I had to pay it back in 45 days. I wrote checks to everyone. We handed them out. Andrew and I were like, man, that was close. And we paid the loan off in 35 days. And you know, you think about that as like a quick moment of scare. No, that's like 35 days of just sitting around, like pacing, wondering, and hoping you were right with your accounts receivable and all of those things.
Well, and I mean, that sounds like definitely a pretty scary situation to be in. You know, and you know, and listening to how things are now, and with the payment terms increasing, etc. Well, how has COVID then impacted you? I mean, that must have been potentially tough last year, things shutting down. What was that like then for a AR VR company, and for your abstract? What was that like
Yeah.
last year?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, there's two pieces to this. There's kind of what it did on the business side, and what we had to pivot from the sales side. And so on the business side, really the thing is, we had a record year in 2019, and we have this major project we're working on overseas. And 2020 was positioned to be absolutely fantastic, and so was 2021, just off of a couple of these projects. Well, the travel ban, everything happening with COVID, really put all of that kind of stalled out, and we had to get really creative on how to overcome those challenges. How do we properly test in augmented reality in an environment that we're working in when we can't be there? So we had to overcome those obstacles. But then on the sales side was really interesting. So in the AR VR space, most people see COVID as an opportunity, and we did too. I mean, they say, okay, everyone's going remote. Well, what better thing than being able to utilize this technology to solve that problem? And they're right, except when COVID happened, we're dealing with a lot of health, safety, and environment directors of training, all these different things. But when COVID happened, they were entrenched with COVID protocol. This wasn't something that they could talk about or even budget for. And then, so what we did is we decided to stop with the sales cycle and go with the educational route. And so in the previous slide, you could see that there was basically a spectrum of realities. So we wanted to take people, not like yourself, Walt, who understand this technology, but educate the ones who don't, and meet with potential clients and say, hey, look, this isn't a sales pitch, this is a lunch and learn. So we walk them through the reality spectrum, which, you know, this idea is that real reality is our everyday life. What we're experiencing today is virtual reality, and that's fully immersing a physical person into the digital world. And then augmented reality is right in the middle. It's taking digital assets and putting them in the physical world through a camera. to a mobile device and a wearable. So we walk them through the spectrum. We walk them through the value because we're starting to get great data. Lockheed Martin has been one of the great organizations who's been releasing all sorts of valuable data around this industry. You know, in this use case alone, it was literally just creating a heads-up display and bringing everything into one place and giving someone an easy step-by-step. And they were trying to reduce, like, I think 30% over here on the right where it's interpret assembly instructions. They're trying to just have a 30% reduction. They had a 95% reduction. So we're starting to get this amazing information. So we wanted to start painting a picture on why you should care. Even the market size. So the market's growing very rapidly. And after all the sources that we looked at, you're going to see a major spike in 2024 and 2025. And we think we're big believers of the reason that spike happens is the augmented reality wearables become the field of view is better, battery life's better, price point is better. So it becomes more scalable for organizations. And we wanted them to understand this because especially in the industrial sector, they typically aren't always, you know, the most forward thinking in some organizations. So we wanted them to understand if they're not considering this technology, will be left behind. And this is what we did literally for a year. It was actually a bit of a grind session because it felt like we were just planting seeds all over the place, you know, at a hopes that when timing becomes more appropriate and things normalize, that this would actually, you know, start providing initiatives and budgets for the future. Oh, yes. And actually, one of my favorite initiatives we did for COVID. So my company has multiple 3D printers, and we use them a lot to do object testing. So when we're going to do augmented reality utilizing object recognition, we sometimes 3D print the components so we can go through and test it here in our office. Well, during COVID, we had those available. So we found this amazing initiative where we were providing ear savers to frontline workers. And interesting enough, because they were wearing the mask so long, their ears would start bleeding, or they would have just really sore and tender. Like, think about wearing sunglasses for like 15 hours, right? You kind of pull them off and your ears start to hurt. This is that times 10. So we started printing these ear savers and actually revamped the whole design, launched it online so that people could download that design and print them themselves. We really were focusing in Houston. And at the time, I think we did over here 1,850 in Houston. Ended up getting to over 3,000 of these ear savers that we printed out because we started shipping them across the nation, started getting pings from out of state. So we just started shipping them out and helping as much as we could. And it was just amazing to be able to help all these people who committed and sacrificed so much during COVID.
Wow. I mean, that's amazing. I had no idea, guys.
Yeah.
You guys had done that. And I guess that comes, though, from some of your background. I mean, in 3D and working 3D for you guys. Like you said, working with 3D printers, you have the skill set to create 3D objects, even if they're for a different kind of solution, not to interact with, but you've created a digital 3D object and now turned it into a physical one. So I think
good figure, right?
That's just amazing. So you know, even sort of leveraging that same skill set in a completely new way, really. I think that's amazing
Really?
just to see.
Yeah, what's great about this initiative is we actually had money coming in from other people wanting to donate for the materials. So it wasn't just about us doing it, actually. There was people in Houston that were donating to the cause, actually not just in Houston, across the nation, that were donating money in to help us print more and more of these and keep providing them across all the frontline workers across the nation. It was really an awesome effort.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's amazing. So, I mean, you've told us a little bit about COVID. It sounds like a lot of it was educating people. I mean, it was just an educating year. You're starting to, you know, teach people about the difference between reality, augmented reality, virtual reality, sort of front loading people, if you would, almost your business. So you're educating them to bring them up to a level where you can now start to talk. Let's talk projects, right? But you know, before we get into that, what was one of the hardest decisions, I guess, that you've had to make since this company started?
Yeah, actually, when we started talking about this presentation, I actually I was trying to determine if I really wanted to share that, but I figured, you know what, it's a fireside chat, you know, on a skyscraper, right? Like, what better place than kind of like go all in. So I want to go back to the passion for what you do. Fortunately, it's 10 years now that we've been in business. And, you know, when I'm a founder first and a CEO second, in essence, and as a founder of a company that you really believe in and you love, you sometimes have to make really hard decisions. And for me, not to sound like a 1990s no fear shirt, but I'm in this to win. You know, I'm not playing not to lose. And as we got hit by COVID again, and we were surviving and going with all of this, you know, all of this push, I'm just not a believer of like just stringing it out. And our team made such sacrifices when COVID happened. We took a very proactive approach versus reactive. We went to the team, we all volunteered pay cuts and figured out how can we all ride this out, because we don't know how long the storm's going to be. So it got to the point now where I wanted to make a move. I wanted to see how we can push revenue and drive it. And I decided to fire myself and get myself off of payroll as a full-time employee, and still stay on as a founder and even acting CEO. So I'm still involved in the decision-making process. I luckily have started this group in Houston called Entrepreneurs Anonymous, and it's a group of entrepreneurs. We all meet once a month. We help each other solve problems and go through all of this. And because of that network, I was fortunate that I found a gig with a company called Golden Section Technology. It's actually one of the sponsors of this event. And I'm the acting COO of the company, and the CEO is fully aware of Abstract and my involvement with it, and that he completely supports it. The team has been absolutely amazing. I cannot be more fortunate that they were willing to take this on and let me make this move for the good of Abstract. And this is definitely the hardest decision I think I've ever had to make.
Yeah, I mean that is. I mean, hats off to you. I mean, for doing that. And I mean, it sounds like, I mean, you definitely have. There is something unique going on in Abstract. I could tell that that's because of you guys and how you lead and drive that company. Decisions you've made have obviously brought it to where it is, and the successes that you've had. So, let's move a little bit away, I guess, from the founder side. Maybe we go into the AR VR side. Talk about the
Sounds
tech
great.
a little bit. So, about the tech. So, how has it been used? What kind of solutions are you creating? Maybe you could just paint the picture, so that for some of us who are in the audience but not familiar with augmented and virtual reality.
Yeah, absolutely. So to dive into virtual reality first, we use virtual reality mostly in the training space. And so as we, again, work with a lot of industrial companies, we focus on safety training. Health, safety, environment's a big area. All these companies typically have life-saving rules. What's fascinating about a lot of the training is that it's all very traditional. It's all very much online, or you're watching videos and doing some test taking. But, when you're dealing with life-saving rules, you want to tap into experiential learning. And VR is proving to be the closest thing to experiential learning that you can, besides the real thing. So for us, we see a lot of value in walking them through hazard identification, different areas of training that you can't even sometimes do in the real world, like catastrophic, preparing them for crazy moments. And so with virtual reality really evolving and obviously going untethered now and being able to buy a headset for $300, there's so much more range and scalability inside VR that companies can really adopt now, which is great. Also, what's amazing for us is, you can go through visual inspections, you can get your hands on valves, you can really let them fully experience a process, but add randomization into the mix so that it's not like a test. They cannot memorize the game. You want them to memorize their procedures, but not necessarily be able to cheat the system, so to speak. And again, we like to track all of this in Hubxr. So as you're going through these training assessments, every valve you pull, every move you go through, we can track it and log it and build an assessment off of that training. One of my favorite projects that we've worked on to date is for Texas A&M, actually a little outside the industrial sector. But I wanted to share this use case because it was just an amazing experience, and it really paints the picture of the value of VR. So when you think about distracted driving, Texas A&M actually runs these amazing presentations to high schools, colleges, and organizations. And the first initiative was around texting and driving. They go through, it's actually funded by State Farm. It's one of their community outreach programs, and it's fantastic. They fully support this initiative for Texas A&M. They go around to these organizations and they present all of this amazing data, the emotional reasons around why you shouldn't text and drive, because the outcome of when you can't react. One thing they didn't have is the ability to have someone experience it. You can't really put a high school kid in the parking lot, have them drive around while texting and throw things at the car, right? So the closest thing that you could do is VR. So what we did is we added a steering wheel and pedals. You're driving in virtual reality, and it really feels like you're in the car. You can see on the right up here, while you're holding the controller, you actually are looking at a cell phone. You have to respond to a series of text messages. And while you're doing that, we're tracking your head movement. So what we've done is we randomize cars pulling out in front of you. We just don't know which one's going to pull out. It was only going to happen when you were distracted. And so it was a really great experience. And then since then, we added the version 2, and it was speeding too close. And where this came in to show the emotional reaction that you can get in VR, there was a person who got inside the simulation. They start driving inside, see a highway, and they get close to the car. There's a line on the road that you have to get in front of. Well, eventually the car in front of you slams on its brakes. She panicked when it happened, and she pushed so hard on the steering wheel and brake that she slid the simulator back about a foot. And she pulls the thing off like she felt like she was getting in a wreck. Her heart was racing, and she's like, wow, that was incredible. And I tell that story because that is ultimately the true power of virtual reality, the full immersion from the sound to the feeling to the depth of field you get inside of it. That's where VR is super special. So on the augmented reality side, we do everything from image-based tracking, environment, object, and area. And so to give that a little bit more context, the example I did of Dynadrill earlier, that's off an image. So if you hold your phone, the camera up to an image, it's going to see the image and it's going to provide that digital overlay in the physical world. Well, the other type is environment tracking. And we partnered with an amazing company called StatVision, and it was for a client named Zeters. Zeters is such a forward-thinking company. This use case really impressed me, and it was a really fun project to work on. But Zeters offers a whole bunch of equipment to construction companies, and these are mobile offices, storage containers, dumpsters, even porta potties. One of the issues they were dealing with is how can people properly visualize the size of the equipment they need inside their construction site. So what we did is we built an augmented reality app that utilizes environment tracking. Basically can track the ground, and once it tracks the ground, you can place whatever object you want inside the real world. And so for this case, you can see I was testing this in our parking lot, and I dropped it in the parking lot between two cars because I wanted to see that it could take up the 3 spots, and there was still room for other cars around it. And you can walk around the environment. You can drop a dumpster. I never thought we'd create an augmented reality porta potty, but we did. And you can see everything inside the space and walk around and see how it aligns inside your site before you actually order your equipment. And that really allows you to get a full visual and understanding of the size of this equipment and what's going to work for you in your environment. Zeters has plans for a lot of really cool features in this in the future, but this first version, this was the objective. And I'm really impressed with how forward thinking they are. It's such a differentiator in their industry as well. That'll add a special element to their clients.
Yeah, I love that. So that's awesome. And that is a huge, I mean, that looks like a real live container. I mean, it's taking up about, what is that, 3 parking spots, it looks like right there.
Yeah, it took a lot of tests. It took a lot of testing to do to make sure the scale was right. Like that took a little bit of trial and error. We were actually getting it within I mean, it's not like within a millimeter, right? But it's definitely completely close enough that you can check it. Actually, I wanted to share one more amazing project that we're working on, but I have to be a little vague here. One of the things that we do is object tracking. So one of the special projects we work on is taking a large piece of equipment and being able to provide digital overlays for a process right there on that piece of equipment. So now what a technician can do to paint the picture for any company that's dealing with equipment is they can hold a device up, point it at the object, it recognizes the geometry of that object and puts a digital overlay on top. What it also allows the technician to do is not need diagrams anymore. They can just use the overlay. And then we incorporated all of the workflow to logging that inspection, logging that process inside the application. We track it. We can track everything that's going on inside that inspection. And by the end of it, the technician didn't need to use anything but one application. They didn't have to chase documents. They didn't have to go interpret any of them. And at the end of the day, we can see the entire time it took to do an inspection, and we can automate the inspection report straight inside a platform. And what a massive improvement in a workflow that we were able to do. I hope to announce that project hopefully within the next 6 months to 12 months where we can go public with that full use case.
Oh yeah, that is impressive. I know that I'm sure there's a lot of folks who look forward to hearing more about that. Wow. I mean, so you've talked us through a couple of these projects, but I mean, as I'm looking at this, and I'm just trying to think of it maybe from someone who's not familiar with this technology, but they see this and it looks amazing. So are there any challenges that come from working with organizations that might not be as familiar with this technology? They see it, they maybe see the sort of the wow effect initially, but they recognize the ROI, but they don't fully understand what this tech is.
Yeah, I think so in this business, it's definitely a little complicated. I mean, like Walter, when I deal with you, you're like, I don't have to sit there and walk you through and educate you and really sell you on the technology, the hardware, and all that. I just have to sell the company and say, like, we're a vendor, this is what we do, this is what we can do for you, and you can buy in. When we're dealing with someone who doesn't have experience in this technology, there's kind of the sales cycle ultimately is very long, and we have to educate them and sell them on what is possible with augmented reality, not just what they see online, the marketing pieces, but what is really the art of the possible. We have to educate them on the value proposition of the technology. And then we have to also sell them on hardware. We pitch mobile first a lot when we can, because we know that the industries that we're in, they have already adopted devices, and so we try to embrace the technology that they already have. But sometimes they are really focusing on hands-free, so now we have to sell the hardware. So now we've gone through 2 steps. Well, the third step is then selling ourselves as a vendor and letting them build that trust with them that we can provide and execute effectively. And the fourth one is the actual use case. So once we've sold ourselves as a company, we have to walk through the use case, generate create a business model that works, that makes sense, that justifies the return on the investment and all these different things, and then ultimately sell a deal. So it is a bit of a process, but again, we love the education part, and we're willing to invest that time with companies to educate them on the technology, so when they're ready to discuss it further, we can.
So before we get to Q&A and things, I think I've got one more question for you. So what's next for Abstract? So
yeah, so I'm with my co-founder Andrew. We've really taken this a long way with raising minimal money. Again, we didn't follow the traditional VC route and raise a bunch of money, and so we've invested a lot of our own kind of cash flow to progressing our product development on Hubxr, and we have a really solid structure as a company. We have our directors in place. We can execute effectively. So the operational side is very sound. So what we're going to do now is we're going to raise some money. We're going to silo a product development team to really push Hubxr to that enterprise level and take it even further than what we have now. And so go through some fundraising. We have some major projects that are pending right now as well. And so as things are starting to normalize and people are starting to really take on this technology and budget for it, we're really going to throw some gasoline on the fire on our business development and marketing front and start working on these larger scale projects.
Awesome. Thanks a bunch, Brian. I mean, it's been really amazing. I've really enjoyed listening to not just the technology, but just hearing your story. I think it's been really, really helpful. And I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of people out there who are either entrepreneurs themselves that can relate to your stories, or they're are even thinking about it and have learned something new about some of the ups and downs and the roller coaster ride of your experience. So really, thank you so much for sharing that. So,
yeah, absolutely. It's great. I wanted to say that because I couldn't show all the videos, there are some of the videos online. So if you go to abstract.tech, you'll be able to see like the A&M example. You'll be able to see that actually in motion, so you can kind of get a better grasp of what that's like. And definitely check out our website and go through our portfolio and kind of see some of the experiences.
Awesome. So I'm going to open it up for Q&A. So if you're in the room, just raise your hand and give me then a moment, and I will unmute you and give you the microphone, if a virtual microphone that'll make your voice louder, so you can ask your question. So if you're in the room, raise your hand. And otherwise, anyone who's on the 2D stream as well, for all of you watching, you can post it in the chat. I'll grab some questions from the chat. But yeah, so just to throw that out there. And just check here real quick, looking through in some of the chat. Okay, so I mean, first question I have for you: do you have a preference between developing for AR or VR? Do you see one excelling faster than the other?
Yeah, that's a great question. To me, I think augmented reality has far more use cases. So I think, and it's also statistically based on the numbers, and we're seeing it's going to be the bigger part of the market between AR and VR. Again, in our industry, like we're seeing VR use cases really targeting training. And it's very specific, where when we look at AR or mixed reality too, it really fits training, it fits operations, it covers really the spectrum between everything. And so to me, I see more opportunity, and I also see more development happening in augmented reality versus VR. I just feel like it has more dimensions to it than VR. Not that I don't love virtual reality. To me, it's always more captivating. Put the headset on and you travel into a fantasy land, basically. And I think it has that bigger impact right now. But I think AR is going to just take it by storm over the next couple of years.
Great answer. And I'm leaning your way as well. I do think that, really we've got all the tools already in place for AR, and I know VR's catching up, and it's going to become probably the new norm. But we've definitely got probably an AR short term versus a little bit longer term. Some of the VR pieces. Oh, I got another question coming. Just checking the audience, see if I see any hands real quick. Oh, I do got one hand. Just give me a second. Unmute. Give you the mic.
Yeah, I was just curious in terms of like which industries you think are like the spaces to watch for virtual reality applications, from a business level, I guess, over the next like 2 years, once virtual reality is a little bit more adopted. Do you think there are any particular industries that are the ones to watch?
I mean, that's a good question. I'd say that whatever industry you're in, I know it sounds like a weird answer, but the thing is, I haven't seen an industry yet that's not starting to adopt it in some way. And so, the use cases really apply to all the industries. I mean, I'm seeing, there's a heavy movement in retail around, I mean, not just training, but even how you place things on the shelves. You're tracking eye movement to understand where you place the best packaging and all these different signage. It's really pretty incredible. But there really is an industry that I haven't seen that's starting to approach this technology. So I would say keep your eye on your industry or the things closest to it. And I hate to give such a broad answer, but to be honest, that's really the case.
And I mean, I'd chime in with that. I mean, I know that there's probably social, I think, is definitely one of the things that we saw as the first adopters, right? I mean, you had the filters, they've come, the overlays. That's been a really, really, I could say one of the biggest, one of the larger, I guess you could say, places of where we've seen mass adoption as a use in social media. I think right behind that, especially when you look at the enterprise space, they would probably call out training, maybe leading a bit more, especially when you look at some of the metrics compared to others. HSC, well, a lot of what the stuff I see tends to be in that space. But like you said, it can range. I mean, there's people, I've seen some of these new deployments or these new experiences at Ford and others helping. They're building their cars and they're designing it in engineering. So from the engineering down to this is also how you're going to interact with the car when you get it, and this is how you're going to. The owner's manual is just going to appear on the dashboard. I think that there is a wide range of use for this technology. It is tough to say any one, but I would probably call out a couple of those of social media, some of the enterprise side, probably HSC training, that are sort of leading the way a little bit further along than others. Yeah,
I think the reason why health, safety, and environment, HSE, is taking a big lead in the industrial sector is because it's really company-wide training. Like, if you're going to go anywhere into a facility, you have to go through the safety training. So it really covers everyone in the company versus something very specific. If you start diving into like a really heavy process, right, that could, lead to maybe something catastrophic and you want to train something on, that's a limited amount of people that really have to go through that training. So I think the HSC side, knowing that experiential learning is really the key to that. I think that's why it's such a big, division inside these organizations that are focusing on it.
Another question came in from our 2D streamers. So what do you think the future of haptics and our physical response will be for the use in immersive tech?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think anytime you can incorporate that, you kind of tap into another sense, so to speak. And there's a lot of companies that are releasing all sorts of different type of equipment to help with that. I think that, again, it goes to cost and scale for a lot of these companies. And so it right now is going to be very limited because of that cost. However, I would say that anytime that you can really incorporate that into your training and add that element, it's very valuable. I'll actually give an example similar to that. When we did the distracted driving simulator, my biggest concern was actually motion sickness. So I do experience from motion sickness. And what's weird about doing VR driving is that you're seeing it and you get all the movement, but you're not feeling that. The equipment they're using doesn't have the shifting and rotation and movement that you would expect to feel, so it can kind of mess with your senses. And kind of going to that same thing here, like the more you can tap into that piece, like you can really provide a much more immersive experience. I just think scaling that hardware across an enterprise organization is going to be challenging, just like it is early stage when VR came out. You had to invest $1,500 on a computer and then $400 on a headset. And how do you scale that across the globe. We're going to run into the same thing until those prices get down, things get better, and you can justify the investment.
Agree, completely agree. And I've got one more that I'll pull in from our 2D streaming, and then if anyone else has a question in the audience, again, just raise your hand and give me a moment, and then I'll unmute you. But another one coming in from our 2D streamers is, what do you imagine the future of XR will be for our everyday life?
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, I think we're being more and more connected regardless, but I think that you're going to have Apple's already starting to look at releasing their glasses, right? And they've been waiting. They're waiting in the back to provide something that's super valuable, and it looks like they're going to be using, basically tethering to the phone to be able to provide a really great experience. And I think it's going to be like your smartwatch, except kind of on steroids, so to speak. You'll be able to wear glasses. You'll be able to navigate the streets where you see things overlaid in the physical world. You won't have to look at your phone while you're trying to walk on Google navigation, and trying to figure out which street you need to turn on. It's all going to be provided in front of you. And that, I think, is the same for your text messages and all of your interaction. It's going to open up the opportunity for you to ultimately never need to look at your phone. People are kind of doing that from their watch to a basic degree. But once I think it becomes a wearable that people actually want to wear, like, you're not going to walk around the streets in a HoloLens right now, let's be honest, right? But if you're able to walk with something that is really slick and lean and stylish, I think that's where you see consumers walking the streets in them, like probably the Apple glasses, I think, will be the first sign of that.
Well, they got the new Snap glasses they come out. I don't know if I'd wear them in the streets, but yeah, like you said, they're getting smaller, more compact. Definitely only a big step down in size, and
which means they need to utilize the phone, right? Like, they need to attach to the device. But I think, let's be honest, until they're stylish, until people are like, don't feel like they look, goofy wearing them, they're not going to embrace the technology on an everyday basis.
So that's all the questions from our 2D streamers. Like I said, I think we could probably cut it off, and we'll leave the last few minutes. I guess if you're all right with it, Brian, the last few minutes to mingle. If anyone else who's here in Altspace, we've got quite a really great turnout here. We've got quite a few people
here. I love it.
If you'd like to actually just ask Brian a question, either face to face or avatar to avatar, you can go ahead and do that, and both of us will just hop off stage. And for all of our 2D streamers who are watching up there through Floating Scott, who's our camera guy floating up there, we'll wave, I guess, to you guys goodbye, and thank you for joining, and
thank you very much.
The rest of Houston Tech Rodeo.